noir, which is finely minced. Now, what you do is you take the julienne cut, and it's just a variation from that. You just take the julienne cut, turn it now so it's perpendicular to your blade, press on it with your fingertips, and again, using that same rocking motion and the heel of your knife, you come straight down, cutting it into tiny little cubes. And this is known as finely minced, or in France, the name is brunoise. And there you have our examples. The next technique is smashing. I'll use garlic first. Now, there's a couple of rules to follow on this. Make sure that the product you're smashing is not taller in height than it is in width. Also, make sure that it's not wider than the blade of your knife. And before you come down with a tremendous amount of force, what I want you to do is just tap it lightly to make sure that you got it going and it's cooperating and it doesn't take off like a rocket. Now, once you get it to that point, what I want you to do is remove the garlic clove from the peel. Now, once you get it to that point, again, I want you to get it going. I want you to bring it towards you. So again, you have that ability for that blade to be flush with the board without any gap in between. Now what I want you to do is I want you to hit it hard. And I want you to drag your knife against it. And look at that. Now we have minced garlic, which normally takes you minutes to prepare, now done in only seconds. I'll now demonstrate the same smashing technique with ginger. I make sure that it's not higher than it is wide, and I make sure it fits underneath my blade. And before I come down on it with a lot of pressure, I make sure it's cooperating. Now it's separated to two pieces, which I'll split. And again, I will smash it into a paste. But now, ginger is very fibrous. Notice all these fibers. So what I do now is I line these up perpendicular to the blade of the knife, and then I just come down with a rocking motion again, and I mince those. So again, garlic, ginger, this technique also works for lemongrass. What normally takes you sweat and a lot of tears in the kitchen now can be done in a minimal amount of time. Now I'll demonstrate how to chop parsley or any herb. Chopping herbs is easy. What you do is you take a motion from the back and you go to the top of the herb. Then you scrape down towards you and then you go to the rear of the herb. Now make sure your hand is not pinched on the top of the blade, but actually is in the center of the bottom of the palm. And that will enable you to have control and safety. And once you learn this technique, you can then gain speed and chop a lot of herbs in a minimal amount of time. That will ensure safety as well. The next technique uses the back of the knife and is wonderful for scaling fish. Now, you're going to see these things fly around like crazy. They usually wind up in my hair. And you might want to do this technique outside before you bring the fish in, because let me tell you, it is quite the cleanup. The back of the blade works perfectly because it has a 90-degree edge and it has the rigidity to stand up to the scales, and it works wonderfully with this technique. The next technique is how to fillet a whole fish. This is a side-swimming fish, fresh salmon, and it's a very large fish. So I'm actually going to increase the size of my knife. This is a 12-inch chef's knife. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is cut behind the gill area. There's a little bone structure in here. Notice also I'm using a very large chef's knife. This is a 12-inch knife. I always use a knife that's larger than the fish itself. Now, I come behind the gills itself, behind this bone structure, towards the head at about a 30-degree angle, making sure that I maximize the yield. Now what I do, once I have that, I cut through the belly, and I grab this flap with my other hand. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down, and I'm going to twist the knife, and I'm going to turn it over, and then I'm going to bring it down to the tail of the fish. Now notice you're going to hear a sound. If you hear this cracking sound, you know you're right in the zone, because you've cracked the pin bones and you're riding the spine all the way to the tail. So we'll listen for that. So remember, I turn my knife over. At the same time, I thrust it towards the tail of the fish. You hear that? You hear that wonderful crack? I'm right in the zone. Now, I angle my knife at about a 5 to 10 degree angle down against the spine of the fish right here. And that enables I have a smooth sail all the way to the tail. Now remember, I also lift with my thumb the belly of the fish to make sure that my knife doesn't cut it out and I don't waste my yield. So remember, I guide my knife all the way back, all the way to the tail of the fish, and I remove my fillet. And I'm going to trim up this white gill or fin area as well, because we know that that's not palatable either. Trim this up so I can skin it. Okay, now we're ready to go. Now I turn the fish over. I now enter the tail. I angle my knife at about a 5-degree angle, the center part of my blade, and I grab the fish with my opposite hand. Now, stroking gently, I rock the fish back and forth, and I wiggle the tail. And I come all the way through until the head of the fish, and then I come out the other side. Now, what we do is we always remove the pin bones, and then we slice fillets always from the head to the tail of the fish. And that is exactly how you fillet a fish. The next cut I will demonstrate is how to cut fish steaks. Now these steaks contain the backbone and the spine of the fish, adding more flavor to the actual flesh. I've already taken the liberty to cut off the fins and gills with kitchen shears. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to slice straight down through the actual skeleton of the fish and make steaks. And these cuts are fantastic for grilling or roasting, just full of flavor. The second knife is the slicing knife. This is definitely a valuable and essential knife to have in your kitchen. Now, this works wonderfully, obviously, for slicing meats, poultry, seafood, etc. There's a few different grips on this knife. There's actually 3. The first grip is used when you are cutting perpendicular to the surface or at a 90-degree angle to the cutting area. You position your fingers by having all 4 fingers on the handle of the knife, including the index finger, and the thumb basically parallel to the shaft of the blade, facing at a slight downward angle. This technique and this straight up and down motion and this grip on the slicing knife works perfectly for perpendicular slices, such as turkey breast, meats, some fish as well. The second grip on the slicing knife is when you have all 4 fingers on the handle and the thumb actually on top of the blade running parallel. This technique works when you slice to the right, such as gravlax or smoked salmon, a wonderful technique. The third and final grip is the identical grip that you use for spearing proteins, making a pocket for stuffing. Now I make sure I keep all of my fingers, including my thumb, back on the handle. That way, when I spin my knife, my thumb and my fingers are out of the way, and that is the key. So what I want to do is I want to come inside the pocket of the loin itself, creating a pocket. Then I want to turn that over, go through the same spot, therefore creating a wonderful pocket to stuff, whether it be mushrooms or some kind of dressing. It makes a wonderful roast. The next knife is the boning knife. This is definitely an essential knife to have in your kitchen at home. Butchers rely more on boning knives than any other knife. If you trim proteins at home, including meat, seafood, poultry, and more, you need this knife in your kitchen. There's 3 main grips on the knife. The first grip is where I have 3 fingers underneath the handle. You have your thumb parallel to the handle on top of the bolster. Then you have your index finger placed on top of the blade itself. This gives you precision, accuracy, and control. With your index finger on top of the blade, using your tip, you just poke and you spear and you pull with your opposite hand, you pull that meat. Here I have a wonderful lamb rack, and I'm just able to go right underneath against the bones using that tip of the knife and pulling it towards me. This technique enables me to maximize the yield while minimizing waste. We're going to have a great dinner tonight. The same technique works fantastic for flatfish, such as sole. Again, using the tip, I just come straight through the spine, and now I'm able to just separate the actual fillet from the actual spine itself. Next, I'll demonstrate the exact technique with this chicken. Notice I can just go in the chicken with my knife, just spearing and poking and stabbing motion, and I pull that thigh bone right out, and I'm able to go right underneath the oyster just like that. Let me do the other side. Notice,